Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session, introducing MADTECH.AI Benchmarks for Cultural Attractions. Let's meet our speakers. I'm Kyle Shea. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of MADTECH.AI, and I'm thrilled to be joined by John Morey, President of CultureComp. He's spent decades helping museums, zoos, and aquariums and cultural attractions thrive. Today, we're going to be talking about KPI drivers that deliver impact for cultural attractions and introducing MADTECH.AI benchmarks that give you the insights and specifics for your organization. We're tackling a challenge near and dear to both of us, the organizational blindness that occurs when you make major decisions without knowing how you truly compare to your peers. It's time to turn the lights on. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kyle. Thrilled to be here.
All right, so let's get started. I'm going to walk through the agenda and then hand it over to John. So today we'll be covering background and methodology. We'll be going through John's Cultural Attraction KPI report for 2025. We'll be introducing MADTECH.AI benchmarks. We'll be doing a short live demo of the platform, and then we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. John, let's dive in.
All right, Kyle, let's do it. All right, so many of you know, I know many of you on this call, you've heard me talk about using metrics to help define successes and what are those things that people can use to improve or obtain whatever their goals are within their organization. Attendance is one that almost every single organization uses to define success. We have found that attendance can be helpful, but can also be one of the most misleading measurements. So one of the things that we've done at CultureComp is we've taken data on, we're monitoring data on 800 plus cultural attractions around the country. And what we've done is built something called a comp score. And that includes attendance. Attendance is obviously important, but market capture is also really important. And what's really important about market capture is it's understanding or giving credit to organizations that are in smaller markets. They might do really well in their market. So that's where market capture has a lot of value. Obviously, Google rating, or at least theoretically, Google rating is very important. It can also be misleading. We'll talk about that. Then about admission pricing, and then is there balance between an admission program and a membership program? And that's usually through the pricing structure. So we blend all of those things together. We get into what is called our comp score. So today, what we're going to look at are those organizations that have that are performing in the top 25% of comp scores, culture comp scores, as compared to the other 75%. Okay, if you were to think about all this data and we segmented it into quarters, it would show the bottom 25% and the top 25% are going to be massively different from one another. So what we're doing is just the top 25% compared to all of the other 75% to really show what the difference is, or are there differences? And we certainly start to see that. So a couple of things. The first thing is attendance among those organizations that are performing in the top 25% is 4.1 times greater than all of the other organizations. Average attendance among this group is 893,000. So immediately we see, oh, there's a big attendance difference. Is the attendance due to market size? You know, are organizations in bigger markets, are those the ones that are always going to perform better? When we look at market size, it suggests this isn't true. Those performing in the top 25%, their market size is really only about 10% larger than the other 75%. So that's suggesting to us, it's not just because, oh, you're in a big market, you do well. You can be in a smaller market, you can also do well. So what we start to look at then is total market capture. Now we know that the top 25% organizations are in similarly sized markets to those in the other 75%. But market capture is 3 times higher among those performing in the top 25% versus the other 75%. 3.1 times larger. We talk about KPIs a lot. I'll back up just for a second. And so what we've learned over time is that there's 2 types of KPIs. And so there are KPIs that you use kind of like your the temperature of your body. It's important to know. it is the end of all of the other things that you're doing. That's what attendance is, right? It's the end of all of the other things that you're doing. So we've separated KPIs into two ways of thinking. Okay, what are the ones that are the output of the things that we are doing? Those aren't the ones you really should be paying attention to. That's what your goal would be if you were to doing the other KPIs. The other KPIs for us are the ones that affect attendance, that affect market capture, that affect your body temperature, that affect your blood pressure. So when I'm looking at some of these KPIs that we talk about, total market capture is the output. It is not the reason why an organization has high market capture. So it's 3.1 times higher. So if you're performing the top 25%, which is a goal, your market capture is going to be 3 times higher. Your attendance is going to be 4 times higher. So that's why these become kind of, oh, okay, I might not be performing the top 25%, but these are the characteristics of those organizations that are, and that's why I want to be in the top 25%. Resident market capture, also higher at 2.7 times. Now, a lot of you may not even know what your resident market capture is or your total market capture is. That's the data that we have that comes back in and then can tell us by individual organizations what these numbers are for you, for your organization as related to your market. Here's something of note. So organizations that are performing the top 25%, I would argue this is a KPI that affects performance. They get more tourists to visit than the other organizations, about 30% more. This isn't a huge KPI, but it is important. It is a difference where you can see those organizations that aren't just trying to get their local market to visit, but also are taking efforts to get tourists to visit, regardless of your market, are more likely to perform in the top 25%. Visit frequency. These are all of the data points. You're going to see where some of these aren't the KPIs. They don't really matter, right? But we're testing them. And one of the reasons we really focus on visit frequency is a lot of our clients have a goal to increase visit frequency. Maybe many of you in your organization say that's a goal of ours. That, for us, we've never seen that be an important thing to do. Visit frequency is the output of what happens, even if you try to increase it. But here's the deal. Look at what happens. If organizations are performing in the top 25%, have average visit frequency of 1.9 visits a year. That's including members. That's including people who visit lots and lots and lots of times. There's not a big difference between our organizations that are performing the other 75%. So if you're in one of those organizations that says we need to increase our visit frequency, I would first suggest you know what that visit frequency is before you even try to do anything about it. Because if you're right around that 1.7, or if you're at the 1.9, you shouldn't be making strong efforts in increasing that visit frequency overall. That won't, at least from a KPI perspective, that won't lift you into a new, different kind of category. Now, having said that, if you have annual visitation of like 1.2 visits, then yeah, of course, your goal is going to try to be to 1.7 or 1.9. But you don't do that through trying to increase the visit frequency. You do that through other means. Are you engaging? Do you have different offerings? Is your advertising in the market continually? Those types of things. As we move on, the marketing side. So one of the things that we do on these 800 plus cultural attractions is obviously we're not out there doing a name recognition survey in the 100 largest markets. That would be cost prohibitive for us. What we do is the way we measure awareness is through organic keyword search. That's the easiest tool for us to use. You have to type in something that you're aware of for you to be able to search for it, right? So that's our awareness tool, and we're able to do this apples to apples to apples to apples to all 800 cultural attractions. So you can see that awareness, organic keyword search, which is in the top 25%, on average 500,000 keyword searches a year, is 3.3 times higher than the other 75%, which is down at 160,000. This is a big time KPI, okay? So if you don't know what your organic keyword search is, you can probably go find it somewhere. We certainly have that data already, but it's important to note that number. But it's not as powerful as it is when you take this number and then look at it as related to, let's say, your attendance. So here we have something, right? Look at this. The top 25%, their organic keyword search, if you take that and you look at it as related to their attendance, it's only 70% of their attendance. Okay, it would suggest 30% are visiting without doing any keyword search. For the other 75%, the search is way higher. There's more search than visitation. Okay, you would think that's a good thing, but in actuality, it isn't. In isolation, this is not a KPI. What's the KPI that impacts performance? It's our next one. If you took awareness, so that's organic keyword search, and looked at it as a percentage of your market size, now we see a big difference. So what is happening? What does this data suggest? It suggests to us that those organizations that have broader reach in their market, that are expanding past their core, are perform at a higher level. So one thing to note is, okay, our awareness ratio to our visitation ratio might be really great. Okay, great. But that's not a KPI that matters. The KPI that matters is what is our search related to our market size. Those in the top 25% have reach that is beyond their core audiences. They're attracting secondary, tertiary audiences to visit because they're in the market. They're talking to the people, not just their core. This is a critical thing to understand. Interest, the way we define interest is unique website visitors, okay? You can see there's kind of a similar relationship between awareness and interest. So website visitors, in the top 25%, average 1.5 million unique website visitors. If you recall, search was only down at 500,000. So most cultural attractions have a higher level of interest than they do awareness in their markets. That's very, very common. And that's because a variety of other ways, social media, public relations, panda cams, if you will, webcams, people will just go to the organization's website, or they'll come back. They don't need to use search, SEO, or do search to go find that organization. So you can see it's dramatically higher. It's 3.7 times higher for those that are performing in the top 25% versus the other 75%. So this is another critical KPI. Now, again, when we talk about those things that matter, how do you even get to this point, right? There's a variety of other things that come into play. So we're not going into all the reasons why you would increase interest. We're just showing that if your interest is high, it's very likely you're going to be performing in the top 25%. If your awareness is high, it's very likely you'll be performing in the top 25%. We see the same situation in awareness as we do with interest. So if we match that back to attendance, interest represents 141%. So there's more interest than visitation among those in the top 25%. If we look at the other 75%, it's even higher. Well, that was happening in awareness, right? So again, it suggests they're reaching the core. But if we look back to market, same thing happens. Interest, website visitation represents 50% of a market size versus the other 75%, it's only 15%. So two critical things through this analysis that tells us awareness to market size and interest to market size are hugely important KPIs. Those are the ones you need to know. Those are the ones that you have to move. If you're performing at a lower level, those are the ones you have to move to perform at a higher level. There's a pretty clear reason why this starts to happen, right? So this is advertising spend. That's the thing you really have control over. So the advertising spend per visitor among those in the top 25% is $2.05. This is general admission. So if you have GA of, let's say, 500,000 visits, this would equate to roughly $1 million advertising budget. Those in the other 75% are spending $1.82. That's not a big difference, and we know that they're reaching their visitors, right? Not a huge difference here. Where is the huge difference? This is advertising spend. So let's say you had that the $1 million budget. what we see is the amount spent per your market size is $1.40. So if you were in a market size of $1 million, you'd be spending $1.4 million, roughly. Look at the difference here. The other 75% are only spending 16 cents. Okay, Kyle, what is that? So that sticks out to you, right? I mean, all of a sudden we're looking at why is interest higher across market? Why is awareness higher across market? You tell me, right?
I love this stat, John. It's so glaring and so obvious when you see the difference and the opportunity to optimize your marketing spend to reach that local audience.
Yeah, 100%. So this KPI factor is 8.6. When we look at this from the top 25% versus the bottom 25%, that number goes to something like 13. So that you will not find when in our presentation a KPI that has more value than this. I can't see everybody on the call, but I know some of you who are on the call are marketing folks, obviously. This is the number you take. If you're in an organization that is underperforming its attendance or market capture ability, these are the ones, this particular is the one to pay attention to, because it's very, very likely your advertising is being underfunded as to what your goals might be. Web pages visited. So as I mentioned, we track a lot of different things. We'll throw them in this presentation just to see if it matters. Get you off the wrong KPIs, like some of the organizations that we work with that are trying to increase their visit frequency. That's not a good strategy to perform at a higher level. Similarly, if you just looked at website pages visited, that doesn't really matter. It's similar KPI of 1.1. Your website length of stay, 5 minutes and 29 seconds versus 5 minutes and 1 second. Slightly longer, but it still doesn't have the same impact as interest, awareness, and ad spend, right? Let's look at the experience. Those that are performing the top 25% have a longer length of stay. So this is something. Now, usually those are large organizations that are probably a little more engaging to some degree. Length of stay for us, we see isn't a huge impact, but there is some. And so we recognize that some organizations, particularly those in the other 75%, are just smaller by footprint. Okay, fine. The point of this is what you want to pay attention to is not necessarily trying to get to 2.3 hours, but rather, are we below the 1.7? You know, if you're an hour and a half, it's going to be more challenging. If you're an hour-long experience, it's going to be more challenging. That's going to be where things get impacted significantly. If you're a large organization that has, you know, 2 to 3 hour length of stay, you don't need to increase that at all. That will have virtually no impact. Google rating, this might surprise you. So the average Google rating among people in the top 25% is 4.65. The average Google rating among those in the other 75% is 4.62. This does not mean that Google rating is unimportant, okay? Because here's what's interesting about all of this, is organizations that tend to perform or underperform their attendance potential and their market potential, assuming that they're underspending, tend to have very high Google ratings, like 4.8. A 4.8 is an exceptionally high Google rating. The vast majority of those organizations that have a Google rating of 4.8 are actually in the other 75%. Why is that? Well, that's reflective of the only people who are visiting that organization are the people that are the core. They're the people that found you, not the people that you found to visit. These other organizations in the top 25% are doing two things that pull their ratings down. Okay. One is they get people who are unlikely to visit. Well, if you do that, guess what? Your ratings are going to go down because you're getting people who aren't necessarily, you're already getting your core audiences, but you're getting secondary audiences to actually visit. They don't have the same level of interest, the same level of, well, really an interest in the subject as the core audience does. So those ratings are going to come down. We'll also see some pricing differences. So these other organizations in the top 25%, charge more. When you do that, you can pull that rating down. So those organizations are also maximizing their revenue opportunities. So it's really important to manage to the right Google rating. Now I'll say this, if your Google rating is 4.5 or lower, it doesn't really matter who you are, that's not good. So these KPIs do matter if you're in certain areas that need to come up. So we start to see attendance get suppressed for organizations with a Google rating of 4.5. Not hugely, you might be 2, 3, 5% attendance suppression. 4.4 or lower really suggests a need for some work on that experience. And so our recommendation there would be fix the visitor experience first, then invest in the audience acquisition. Social media sentiment. This is something we started tracking in August, also pretty interesting. So the top 25% have social media sentiment that's positive of 85%, virtually the same as the other 75%. Again, does that mean that this is better or worse? Again, these audiences are getting people who are less likely to visit, and they're not going to rate in social media like a core audience would. You can see a little more negativity, 8% versus the 5%. Again, these organizations also charge more. We'll talk about that in a second. So some of this could be some expense as related to the experience received. Membership, what does membership look like? Well, those in the top 25% have a membership size that's generally 2 times larger than the other 75%. If you recall, attendance was 4 times larger. So theoretically, you'd say if it's in balance, membership would be 4 times larger, but it's not. What do the top 25% do? They get people who are less likely to visit. So those folks are going to be less likely to be members. They also get more tourists to visit, also people who are going to be less likely to visit. So there's not going to be that same kind of ratio between attendance and membership. This becomes more important. So membership conversion for us is a more important KPI. So if we saw just here, you can see membership, that's households as related to your general admission attendance. The top 25% gets more members, 8.2% versus the other 75% at 4.7%. When we look at member visitation, is this a KPI? Not a huge one. It is to some degree. But member visitation on average, and we look at member visitation that includes people in party and the number of visits. You can see that equals 10 versus the other 75% is at 8. So those people who do become members are visiting with a higher frequency or visiting with more people in their party. Member visitation as a percentage of gate attendance or general admission attendance. On average, you can see those in the top 25% is at 28% versus the others are at 75%. Now, if you're an organization that has 40%, 45%, 50% of members visiting on those days, I'd strongly encourage you to understand that's probably not good. You probably are in a situation where you have too many members. Look at this, member retention. I know a lot of our clients love this as a KPI. Oh, we need to have this, we need our renewal rate to go higher. Well, maybe, but that's not a characteristic. It's not a KPI that factors into those performing in the top 25% versus the other 75%. Here's what happens with some of these KPIs that people use. We need to increase our renewal rate. Well, you're doing all the things, assuming you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing to increase renewal, that's a hard thing to do. But if you really are running to that number, fine, acquire fewer members. If you want your renewal rate to go up, acquire fewer members. And how do you do that? You charge more for membership. You reduce the transactional value of membership. You might be then, though, chasing the wrong KPI. If you're saying, well, we need to increase our renewal. Now, obviously, if you're down at 35% renewal, that needs to come up. But it doesn't need to go screaming over these 52 or 53%. Now, I will say this is also different by genre. So if you're a museum, I think our average renewal rate around there is around 60% versus if you're a science center or a children's museum, those numbers are in the upper 30s, lower 40s. So there's a big difference between cultural genre. The member expense per household. Those in the top 25% spend less per member household than those in the other 75%. Now, here's what it's interesting to some degree is top 25% budget is 300,000 on average versus other 75% is 200,000. So the top 25% is getting a better value in the money they spend. The diminishing return is less. So they're spending enough to do this, but they also get more members. The other 75% are spending more on membership and they're getting fewer members. So it's important to just understand that. Also, are you running a bunch of events? Because we'll see this with art museums be quite a bit higher. When we look at some pricing, as I mentioned earlier, pricing, all right? Those in the top 25% charge 1.7 times more than those in the other 75%. This is probably, if you take away one thing here, almost all of our clients believe if they charge more, then their attendance is going to go down. Now that is true if you're charging on a barrier price or a threshold price. That is true. But most cultural attractions do not charge in that way. So for example, somebody might charge $16. Well, $16 in 1995, the market views to be the same thing, not 20. 20 becomes a barrier price. So one thing to do is evaluate, are you pricing to what the market defines your value to be? And are you pricing just below thresholds? If any organizations here, you charge $12, you can charge $14.95 overnight, probably. We do the work, we do the data to tell us if that's actually true. But these organizations that are performing in the top 25% charge more, and then guess what? And get more people to visit and get similar Google ratings. What do they end up with? They end up with more revenue to reinvest in expertise of staff, more qualified staff, because they have more money to distribute into salaries. They also take that money and reinvest it into advertising and audience acquisition programs. So most organizations that are underperforming do so because they underspend in advertising. And then what happens is they say, well, we don't have enough money to spend in advertising. Those organizations usually are not price optimized. So price optimize first in that situation, increase that revenue, reinvest that revenue increase into acquisition, and you now have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Membership pricing. Those in the top 25% spend the average membership price is 1.6 times. That aligns exactly with what admission was, 1.7 times higher. And if you're interested in looking into, well, what are those numbers? Well, the average in the top 25% for an individual is 89, top 25% for a dual is 138, average for a family is 207. You can see there's quite a bit a difference here between all these other organizations. More importantly, though, is what is the transactional value. So transactional value is the number of visits required to pay for membership. And so you can see in the top 25%, for individual, on average, it costs 3.1 times more than the cost of admission. See, the other 75% is 3.8. For dual, 2.4, and for family, 2.2. You can see in every single scenario, the top 25% has a better transactional value than those in the other 75%, even though they charge more for membership. These organizations have alignment between their admission pricing structure, which is higher. So this is where they can perform better, not just in admission revenue, but membership revenue. All of you that have membership programs, that if you're undercharging at admission, you might be charging appropriately at membership, but the transactional value is weakened because the admission price is too low. So those are scenarios where you would keep your membership price the same, increase your admission price, and what are you going to see? You're going to see increased admission revenue. You're also going to see a greater conversion to membership. And so with that, one of the things that I'm really excited about our partnering with MADTECH.AI is, in the past, many of you have purchased our KPI reports, which is the individual report you receive showing your data in comparison to local, national, and peer data sets. That's a stagnant PDF report that you get, which I love. But what MADTECH.AI does now, all of this stuff, this report now lives in a dynamic software system that Kyle's going to give some demonstration with here, which I'm really, really excited for, because it just brings all of this more to life. than just our standard PDF.
Well, John, that was great. Thank you so much. And we appreciate the partnership to really bring this to life. As John mentioned, we've built this problem to help solve organizational blindness, where it gives you clear side-by-side view of your performance. With MADTECH, you see exactly where you compare. So you're able to see, and I'll walk through this, the local, national, and peer organizations where your benchmarks are. You identify attendance opportunities. You're able to evaluate your membership performance, access those pricing structures that John talked about that are so important. And you're able to look at your marketing assessment and recommendations. The great thing is all in one view. And then what's fantastic about our platform that we're able to offer to you is all of these great benchmarks are layered with decision intelligence for you to pinpoint your specific growth opportunities and your gaps. So this isn't just data, as John mentioned about. It helps you create that strategic foundation for your next budget or next marketing plan. So I'll walk through the platform now here. So what you see up on your screen, this is when you log in, and it brings you to this first page. And what you see actually right here in the middle is Maddie, is our AI assistant. So it says, "Hi, Bill, welcome back. How can I help you?" So what I'm going to show you here is anonymized for one of our clients that we're calling Attraction Z. And the amazing thing, I'm sure many of you use AI on other platforms. This is just specific to cultural attractions, museums, zoos, aquariums, gardens. And we're using the data of 809 cultural attractions that has over 12 million visitor data points and membership data points to be able to leverage all of these decision intelligence insights specific to your cultural attraction. So when you see it here, you can go ahead and ask a question. I just have a couple of preloaded questions here. So you can specifically type anything in you want, and it actually gives you all these answers right away. So it's really amazing what you can ask right directly on the screen. So I'll do one more here real quick. So how cool is this, right? So let's say you're jumping into a meeting quick, or you're trying to get an insight. I know we've all spent hours where you're like, gosh, what was the name of that report? Or who sent me that email? So this allows you to answer all these questions right here, specific to your cultural attraction. So now what we'll go to is we'll jump over to the benchmarks dashboard.
Kyle, if I may interrupt there too, is, all of us have probably had these experiences with AI. I have been I have not been impressed with AI as it relates to cultural attractions. One of the things that we started talking about was artificial intelligence versus authentic intelligence.
Yeah.
What we've done here is this Maddie is trained by us. It's trained by our knowledge, our 31 plus years of data collection and seeing what's happening. So Maddie here isn't Claude, it's not ChatGPT, which if you were to go ask those places, they don't have the data that supports their intelligence. That's what Maddie has. It makes it very, very different.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. Really great point here. So I'll touch on a couple of different points here. There's a lot of information here. So, we can do a separate preview for people individually outside of this, and I'll show you how to get in contact with me after this. But what you get, this would be specific to your cultural attraction. So this happens to be a zoo that's located in Denver, Attraction Z that we're using. You get to see a high-level snapshot of your KPI and data summary. So you look at market capture, pricing, the CultureComp comp score. And then on the right hand, Maddie summarizes all this. So you get a nice overview. You get insights on your visitors, awareness, the experience. But really the value is when you dive into each one of these. So specifically, if you're looking into attendance and positioning, you can see, all right, how do I rank locally? So you'll have all of your market capture for residents, first what you have versus your local peers. What I really love about this one, what John talked about, the importance here is understanding your visitor origin and those residents. So you're able to see, all right, we're capturing 77% of our attendance are residents. I really love this stat here on the market segments. So you're able to understand who's actually coming to your, in this case, a zoo. And you're able to see this full breakdown of who they are and what the segmentation looks like. I'll go a little bit deeper in there. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, go back down there, Kyle, because just zip on down. This is one of the cooler features, I think. If we go even down one more, here we go. So we take the data on your visitors that we collect via cell phone data that's in apps, 250,000 apps that a company manages. We take that data, we send it over to a company called Persona Live that has segmented the American population into 17 different segments within the market. So ranging from highest income families down to lowest income diverse urban singles, right? There's two things that happen here. One is you can understand what percentage of your attendance is low income, and does that represent the market, so that we can get everybody off of, okay, we've served the underserved at an appropriate ratio, great. But where are the pockets for us to do better? And so that's where you start to see if you're trying to grow. So for example, yeah, Kyle, on that one right there, it's diverse young professionals. This organization has 137,000 of them, but there's 518,000 in the market. The next group, white collar suburban families, they have 131,000, but there's 482,000 in the market. So this really hones in and identifies, oh, where are those pockets of opportunity for us that we can improve performance and increase attendance.
Thanks for that insight, John. Yes, this is one of the key drivers that we regularly see here. I'll jump over to the pricing position section. So this gives you a snapshot across everything. So you're looking at where do you compare on admissions pricing, membership pricing, and John talked about the importance of membership transaction value. You'll be able to see exactly where you are versus all your local peers on attendance, admission pricing, as well as membership pricing. So John talked about, well, where are your total website visitors? What are your unique search volume? How much average time are they spending on the website? We have all this information for your individual cultural attraction right at your fingertips. So really cool to see exactly where you land. So in this case, they're one of the leaders in the market, in their local Denver market here. But you're able to really understand, all right, what are things that we should be looking at? What are opportunities to improve here overall? So you have all of this in a really easy summary to put into your leadership presentations, to your board, to your marketing team, to really understand where do we compare and where do we make improvements. Now I'll move over to attendance benchmarks. So there's a lot of great information in this, and sometimes it looks overwhelming, but it really allows you to dive into this information. What's really cool is on the right-hand side, our AI summarizes the insights. It gives you the visitor persona. So there's a ton of great valuable data, but Maddie, our AI, actually summarizes all this for you to be able to give you this information to understand how you break this down. Now I'll move over to membership assessment class here. So this one I really like. It gives you a sense of where are you today? So what are your membership households? So where are you compared to the median versus the top 25? What's your conversion rate and acquisition? So how do you compare versus the median versus the top 25? Same thing on conversion rate. So this gives you a really good benchmark and base of understanding where are we today and where can we grow. It also helps you set realistic expectations. I've talked to many cultural attractions where they say, well, each year we just end up setting the bar at 5% growth year over year. Is that realistic? They might be doing great on attendance, but maybe not great on membership. So it really helps you understand what you should focus on and actually give you that data to be able to talk to your leadership, to talk to your board on what you need to focus on. And the last section we'll touch on is, again, all in one view. This is great. You're able to see your revenue assessment. So John talked about the key importance of, are you pricing your admissions to the right price? Is your membership pricing to the right price for an individual, for a couple, for a family? So this allows you to see where you are versus the median versus the top 25. You're also able to look at this membership transaction value. There's a lot of great data points in here. And then lastly, you're able to see, all right, where do you compare? A lot of people look at this 5-year value. Where do you compare versus the top 25? Where do you compare on your membership value ratio? So all of this is in here. It gives you great insights, and this is specific to your cultural attraction. So it allows you to understand, what do you need to focus on? What direction should you have? It gives you transparency across your organization to be able to focus on the right strategic planning and put the right budgeting in place.
Kyle, go to the KPI data summary. This is my favorite. And go down, keep going to that pie chart. Look at this. I love the attendance one.
Yeah.
So this organization did 1.8 million in attendance. If they were to match the same market capture as the top 25%, they could have an 11% increase in attendance. It'd be 234,000. That's a hard thing to do for an organization that's performing as well as this one is. But it helps. We have another organization that the visitors is 350,000. Their potential is 750,000. So this alone just helps an organization understand, okay, it doesn't mean you're going to get to this number. It just suggests what could the opportunity be if you fully realize that potential.
And John, leveraging the great insight that you brought on the KPI report, from a national perspective, you get to understand, well, where is your advertising spend? And again, this is one of the top 25% attractions, but look at where you're spending. So they're pretty good from an ad spend per resident versus the median. But look at the opportunities John talked about before. Increasing that advertising spend isn't necessarily what you have to do. It's optimizing that advertising spend. So are you spending the right dollars on residential advertising that has a halo effect from word of mouth, more people going, more people posting about it? When tourists come in town, they talk about going to go see that cultural attraction, versus how are you spending versus the top 25 ad spend for those visitors or tourists. So John talked about this, one of the key drivers to be able to optimize your spend so that you're getting the right mix, so that you're growing your overall audience and you're capturing that potential, as John talked about. John, is there anything else you wanted me to jump to before we move over to Q&A?
No, let's see if anybody has any questions.
Great. All right, so please go ahead and put your questions in the comment section. As we're waiting for questions to come in, I do want to mention on the right-hand side, we do have a QR code that you could scan if you want to request your benchmark preview. This goes to the MADTECH.AI site. It gives you more details specifically on what's included in those benchmarks. And then there's a few different options to go ahead and book a meeting with myself. Would love to spend 15 minutes to walk you through how you can get access to the platform, the features that we have for you, and really make this part of your annual strategic planning in an interactive way. All right, let's see what questions come in.
I mean, we must have done such a good job, people understood.
We'll just hold for 1 second. Everyone's probably typing here. All right, John, I see one question that came in. So, and John, this is really for you. This has been your baby for 30 years and it's such phenomenal data. What makes the benchmarks for cultural attractions different from traditional benchmarking reports?
Well, I don't know about traditional benchmarking reports. I think one of the things that we do, or what we've always tried to do, is one, don't focus on single variables. So what we do is look at the relationship between variables. If everybody performs to the benchmarks, so if we've always said this because we're kind of the data warehouse of benchmarks, we use them all the time. But you have to be careful with benchmarks. And so if you use the average, you're accumulating, okay, here's what everybody's doing together, but it's not necessarily identifying the best practices. So I know that we do that. I don't know if other benchmarks do that, but you also have to be careful with benchmarks. So we really encourage our clients to focus on what are their purposes, what are their goals, and then try to find out, okay, well, what are those KPIs that matter there? One of the things that we've, particularly with pricing, what we've noticed is, okay, people, cultural attractions love to benchmark price. Okay, this is what the Georgia Aquarium charges, so then we can charge this because that's what they charge, right? That is a terrible approach to pricing. And I shouldn't have used Georgia Aquarium. I should use a market where everybody in the market is underpricing. So here's where a benchmark goes wrong. If everybody else is doing something wrong, then the benchmark is identifying that, certainly from an average. And so we like to change, we like to think about using those benchmarks or understanding them in context to actual performance. So just because everybody else is doing something wrong doesn't mean you should. So I think that's where the difference is. Rob, hey, Rob, it's nice to see you. Do you think the shift to online ticket sales has changed the weight of website visits? Rob, I don't know. It may have. Since we started tracking this, so there's two things. Pre-COVID, online ticket sales was really, really low. During COVID, obviously, online ticket sales were really, really high. We have seen online ticket sales diminish over the last, or become less of a percentage of total tickets sold over the last 2 years. But we don't have the data to answer that question, unfortunately.
That's a great question. Thank you, Rob. All right, let me see if there's any other questions. One question came in here, John. So if the attendance is strong for a cultural attraction, why would they still need these benchmarks?
For a variety of different reasons. One is just because attendance is strong, you can have high attendance and low market capture. It means you get a lot of people to visit frequently, but you don't have depth, you don't have breadth, you're not reaching a broad audience. So there's one. Attendance is also often very much misunderstood. You could have a 1.5 million attendance, and what if 500,000 of that is field trips, school groups? So attendance all gets lumped into this thing that they call attendance. We like to look at general admission attendance, membership size, and member attendance. So those are, just because you have high attendance, one, doesn't mean that that's necessarily good. Two, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't grow. But then you start to shift. If an organization has high attendance, let's just say the organization has high attendance and is performing at an exceptionally high level. That's also really important to understand, is that growth is going to be dramatically harder. So you have to switch to a nooks and cranny, or not switch, add a nooks and cranny approach. But organizationally, all of you know that there's a CEO somewhere around saying we need to increase attendance. If you're performing at a really, really high level, it's really important to understand that increasing attendance is not going to be like it was getting to the point that you were. So I would say there's two reasons why this becomes valuable.
Yeah, great.
Particularly that, remember that slide where we showed the market segments, like highest income families? Yep. Well, how much? Okay, fine, nooks and crannies. Let's go find our segment that we need to go market to.
Yeah. Well, great. Let's see if there's any other questions here. I know we're almost up at time. All right. Well, lastly, John and I are excited to announce on Thursday, June 4th, the same time, we are going to be doing another webinar. This one's going to be about the 3 most expensive mistakes that cultural attractions make and what 800 organizations show us about fixing those. So we're excited to be able to cover that. There'll be a lot of promotion that we'll be doing through LinkedIn and outreach as well. So looking forward to having a nice attendance again on that one coming up in about 6 weeks. And then lastly, if you don't know me or if you don't know John, we would love to connect with you. You can find both of us on LinkedIn. My email's on the left-hand side as well. Please reach out to me directly to talk about how you can purchase and get access to the MADTECH.AI benchmark report specific for your cultural attraction. Well, thank you, John. Thanks for joining me today. Really insightful on the KPI annual report for cultural attractions. Want to thank everyone who attended. Again, please reach out to me to discuss how to work with MADTECH.AI for your organization's benchmarks. Have a great day, everyone.